Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica here with
the Flowing Dutchman.
And today we are going to talk about a difference in heavy club technique between his tradition of training and my type of training. I have not seen this particular swing much before. I see him do it, and I've only seen it show up on Instagram in maybe the last 2 years. But it is outside of the learning path that I tend to teach people. I tend to teach people from a two-hand perspective, two-hand pullover, two-hand shield cast, which is top hand, going past opposite ear, because that is the one that the most people can learn the fastest. Then we move to single hand, then we move to outside pullover, inside pullover, then we move to rotating 180-degree pullover. That is my normal path of teaching people the mill or the casting inside throwing pattern. He has an entirely different movement, and he just explained it to me, and it's really interesting because he's taking a single arm shield cast and then putting a hand above his single arm shield cast and still doing the same thing. It's a different way to get to the exact same outcome, but it looks really cool, and I should probably know it. So, will you show us that again, your choke swing?
Yeah, the choke swing, or as I like to call it, like we've got a little bit of a different vocabulary around mace and club, mace and club swings. But the important thing for me to distinguish swings over the shoulder, over the head, is where they're moving from. So they can move either over one shoulder, or they can move from shoulder to shoulder overhead, or they can move traditionally in a ribbon pattern, where they move from hip to shoulder to shoulder to hip, right? So everything that's moving over one shoulder is then a mill in that vocabulary, but it's a bit different for you. But so let's keep calling it the choke swing, because first time I did this, it felt like I was choking myself, right? Because you're here, you're like, ooh, ooh. It feels like you're choking yourself, but you actually have the range to be there comfortably. But you can also change your hands, which makes it relatively more easy, just like you would do with a heavy pullover, to actually reach here. Now, the inspiration behind this movement eventually is the one-handed Gada swing that they do in India. They've got a very particular swing with one arm, and they move over one shoulder. So this would be, in my terminology, a mill with one arm. But this is very difficult to teach.
Yes, I would call that a single side shield cast without a balance.
Okay, well, there you go. Indeed, so you can, what they do there is they also pull it over the shoulder.
They drag it over the shoulder. Can you explain what the point of the drag over the shoulder is?
So it's a form of safety, because you keep it close to the shoulder, and you're always able to then, once you're not able to do the heavy weight anymore and it comes up but you're not having the strength to pull it, you can always pull it over. And in that sense they use it for very heavy Gada technique. So in India you'll find that the goal is, specifically Varanasi and states around it, to go as heavy as you can. So I've seen a Gada of 120 kilos.
That is crazy. That is like God level strength training. I don't even think anything like that exists on the North American continent.
Oh no, of course not. But it does exist. Of course we'll not find anybody who swings it, but there's a legend that somebody swung it once. And there's always a legend around these things in that time. But the important thing here is that it's basically a way, that's kind of how I felt it to be. It's a way of moving towards the single arm swing, but because teaching this for a first timer is very difficult, because you have to move your shoulder out of the way, you have to open up externally to make sure you're not hitting your head, so it's a very complicated swing.
It's a very complicated swing.
Like
the reason I don't teach a lot of stuff like that is because about 90% of the population needs at least 3 years of training to get to the point where they're rotating well enough to do it without clocking themselves in the skull over and over and over again.
So I found an easier way. For me, it's always the ability to have something complex and make it into, break it down as much as I can. And there's different swings. So the moment you can do a full 360, so a shield cast. That means you're able to feel the pendulum, you feel the weight, you feel the actual swing. So that allows you then to start using the same swing, but then in different patterns. Right, so you first got to do, of course, the regular swing. Otherwise, this doesn't really make a lot of sense, because it makes it more complex.
Where's our other mace? Let me grab my other mace. So what is your path of learning on this?
So there's two ways. Of course, you can do everything inside and outside. But the most comfortable way is to do it in a way that your upper hand is doing the rotation. And it can do that inside and outside.
Okay.
Every inside has an outside. So, but inside is usually the easiest version. So you get your right hand up on top, left hand underneath, and you'll start by opening up to the side. So you're basically opening up your thoracic spine towards the right. Okay. Now the way that this moves is because you've opened up your rotator, your shoulder, you can now start to lower it behind you. So you bring it down, but you keep it very close to the shoulder. So there's not much of a press and drop because it just moves over the shoulder, right? So that's the first thing that you gotta figure out. Then, yeah, you gotta keep your elbow underneath. So you gotta keep your chin like that. And indeed, this is where you can start to feel the pendulum. That's good. And now what you'll do next is you turn in towards the left and then keep it close to the shoulder and pull your hands forward. So this will be similar to like a 300 or 10-2 kind of movement where you keep it close to the shoulder. And then you can move your weight against to the right. You do that again, you find your swing, you pull it back. So in that sense, we're now pulling it over the shoulder, pushing your hands a little bit more forward, Mark, instead of down. Yeah.
So why is the point of pushing our hands out?
So think about this. If your weight is 50 kilos on this side and you have
You're just getting it way closer to the center of your frame now.
Yes. So the moment you start pulling it in,
yeah,
this weight starts to become uncontrollable.
Okay.
Especially if you go very heavy and the handle is very light.
Okay.
So this is a way to always catch it back into this movement. So we'll do that again. We'll open up, swing, and pull back. Now once the sliding goes easier, you know the pathway, now you can start to learn a little bit more about momentum. So what we'll do now is we slightly press it up,
okay,
and we push the hands back to the place that we feel comfortable here, that we've worked on already, and then we'll drop it and pull it back. Yes, and then rotate back to the other side, drop it, pull it, and rotate back. Now the progression on this would be eventually to do it without touching the shoulder. So you rotate back the moment you pull in. And you keep the hands in front of the globe. So you keep it balanced. Yeah, exactly. And then eventually you can move towards the other side and rotate the outside version, curl it back. And in that sense, you then...
Okay, so this is really cool. So this is something that doesn't really exist in the style that I've ever learned or anything, because we start from essentially top hand moving past opposite ear because we're working on developing this big swing, because for the most part what we're looking to do is simply get most people towards normal throwing pattern. But now you're introducing this. That's really, really cool.
Thanks.
Awesome.
It's been a big journey for me. The path has always been to try to find the things that, what else is possible. And interestingly enough, the choke swing came before I realized it was a regression of the one-handed mill that was done in India. So I had to break it down eventually and come back to the same pattern. But the fun thing is you can also do it one-handed, so it also led me to start to do it, because what you can do two-handed, you can also do one-handed. So that means you can also swing one-handed like that.
So there, I'm going to call this the choke swing or the choke cast, because that's definitely what it looks like. All right, well, I've got a whole new thing to work on now for the next, I don't know how long until I can figure it out, but we're going to work on it.
All right.
The great thing about kettlebells, clubs, and maces is you are never done. Somebody will always think of something or move in a way you've never seen before. In this case, it is functionally infinite, and the most important thing that you can do is go find a trainer or find a program, work on it, find another one, work on it, and keep going basically forever.
So many possibilities.
An infinite number of possibilities.
Thank you.
Thank you much, sir. Pleasure.